Alright, and good afternoon everyone, this is Patrick, and welcome back to Underdog Dueling, where we take a look at hidden gems and archetypes that people might be sleeping on, and compare their relevance to today's meta. So today, I've got another deck profile for you guys, and this one is actually one, on top of Nephthys, one of my favorite decks of all time, mostly due to its unique playstyle, and that is Dream Mirrors. Now, Dream Mirrors, I don't remember when they were released the first time, but they are a TCG exclusive archetype, and they revolve around the mechanic of light and dark, and, well, mirror opposites. Basically, all of your light field spell works with your dark monsters, and your dark field spell works with your light monsters. Sounds a little confusing at first, and admittedly, it is. The first time I saw this deck online, I didn't know what was going on, and then I decided to read up on some of the effects, and immediately it clicked. So, I love this deck because of its playstyle, and a lot of people don't really know how to counter it. It has received steady support over the years, and Battle of Chaos, as you kind of saw in my Battle of Chaos box opening, that we finally got a dark counterpart that was much needed, and why they didn't release it first, I don't know. But yeah, well, without further ado, why don't we dive into it? And of course, if you want to see more, please remember to like and subscribe, and follow me on Twitter at Soren's Lair. Alright, so here we are, we have the deck in the extra deck, and let's jump right in. So, starting off with one of our two boss monsters, and the main one you're going to be going into a lot of the times is Morpheus the Dreamer Black Knight. She is an 8-star monster with 2800 attack and 1000 defense, and what's neat is, with this deck, all of the counterparts have the same level and same stats, but reversed. So Morpheus the Dreamer Black Knight makes it to where when it's special summoned by the effect of a Dreamer monster, you can just target a card on the field and destroy it. Then during the main or battle phase, if Dreamer of Joy is in a field zone, it doesn't matter which one, you can tribute it off to summon Dreamer White Knight from your deck. This is what a lot of the Dreamer plays revolve around, tributing off one attribute to grab the opposite and triggering their effects, which actually can be kind of fun, and this is a good one to get on the field first thing because you can just pop a card and potentially interrupt your opponent's plays. And I only run at 2 because it is kind of bricky, and it's not something you want to see all the time because it can be easily searched, but it's always a good one to have. On that note, we have 2 copies of Morpheus the Dreamer White Knight, and when she is summoned by a Dreamer monster, I can make it to where she cannot be destroyed by battle or by card effects, and then I can tribute her off to summon Morpheus Black Knight. And again, like with the stat lineup, it is 2800 defense and 1000 attack. So these 2 are pretty much the main ones you want to run at 2. Again, because you don't want to see them all the time because they can be kind of difficult to get out. However, for our one of our main starters, we've got 3 copies of Ikalos the Dreamer Sprite. Now, when she's summoned by the effect of a Dreamer monster, you can add any Dreamer card from your deck to your hand, and then if Dreamer of Terror is on the field, you can tribute her off to summon Ikalos the Dreamer Mara. So she will help put your plays online, and will also just be just a good body to get, and then you can go into her dark variant, Ikalos Dreamer Mara, which I also run at 3, which lets you special summon a Dreamer from your deck from your hand, or from your hand onto the field. A lot of times what you'd want to do is go into Ikalos, tribute her off to get, if you can get Mara, actually first things first, tribute her off to add the cards you need, then tribute her off to bring out Mara. You can special summon Black Knight and immediately pop a card upon summon. So this is actually this is going to be one of your main go-to combos, I guess you could say. And that's why I run it at 3, because it kind of helps make the deck run. Next, 3 copies of Neroy the Dreamer Disciple. So if I control a Dreamer, or if there is a Dreamer on the field, I can special this card from my hand and make this card become Dark Attribute. And if it's special summoned by a Dreamer monster, if Joy is on the field, I can bounce a spell or trap my opponent controls back to the hand, and then if Dreamer of Terror is on the field, I draw a card, then shuffle a card from the hand into the deck. So it could potentially get rid of a brick when this card is brought out. Now, keep in mind, you only need to have one of these field spells out, so if you have Terror out, you'll get the second effect. If you have Joy out, you get the first effect. And if you have them both out, which you'll see how to do so in a minute, you can trigger both effects. So it might be a good way to try and get a new card that you might be missing. And now, here is the actual linchpin of the deck. which why this took a while to get released, I don't know. But that is Neroy the Dream Mirror Traitor. So when this card is normal or special summoned, I can add Neroy the Dream Mirror Disciple from my deck to my hand and then make this card become light attribute. Then I contribute another Dream Mirror monster I control and choose a Dream Mirror monster from my deck with a different level than the monster, add a Dreamer of Joy or Terror that is mentioned in the card text, and then special summon the chosen monster in defense mode. So the way this would work is you would go ahead and normal summon Traitor to go ahead and bring out Disciple, tribute off Disciple to get a special summon of any Dreamer monster that you need from your deck, and get the field spell you need to combo off. And again, a lot of times you'd want to ideally go into, if you already have, say, like Morpheus, either the Morpheus cards in your hand, then you can always go into Kalos and get her search, or Mara to summon from the hand. But it all depends on what you want to do. And yeah, this is a very much needed card. Next, I run 2 copies of Phantasos, the Dream Mirror Friend. This is a level 4 monster, and when summoned by a Dream Mirror monster, I can target a level 8 or lower Dream Mirror monster in my graveyard, except another copy of itself, special summon in defense mode, and then I contribute it off to summon Dream Mirror Foe from the deck. Now, if you start to get like Morpheus in the graveyard or some of your other starter cards in the grave, you can just bounce them back to trigger their effects, as long as you have Dreamer of Terror on the field. Or well, yeah, as long as you have the corresponding field spell that can activate their effects. Then run 2 copies of Phantasos Foe. Basically, when summoned by the effect of a Dreamer monster, this card can attack directly for the rest of the turn, and has the same tribute off effect. It's a 1900 beater on a 4-star, which is never a bad thing. So for a couple little tech cards that I run 2 copies of Chaos Daedalus. So it can only be special summoned by banishing a light and dark monster from my graveyard, and while a field spell is face up on the field, my opponent cannot target light or dark monsters I control with card effects, and I can target cards on the field up to the number of field spells out and and banish them. So it is targeted non-destruction removal, it just straight up banishes them. Which, like I said, this deck does revolve around 2 field spells, and there are a few ways of getting both out on the field. You could do stuff like set rotation to get them both out, or there's a card in this deck that also fulfills that role. I then played 2 copies of Skullmeister. This is a hand trap to where when a card effect is activated in your opponent's graveyard, you can send this card from your hand to a grave to negate the effect. So this can be used to stop certain graveyard effects. It's almost like an early ghost spell in a way. I don't believe it can. Yeah, it won't negate stuff like Ash Blossom because it does have to. Because the effect isn't being activated in the graveyard, it's being activated in the hand, if I recall. But this does have some good utility to try and halt some of your opponent's plays. So that is it for the monsters. Let's go and get into our field spells, and, well, spell and traps in general. We run 3 copies of Dream Mirror of Joy. Now, Dream Mirror of Joy is a field spell to where during the end phase, you can banish the card to activate Dream Mirror of Terror directly from your hand or deck, and you can only use this effect once per turn. Dream Mirror monsters I control cannot be targeted by card effects or attacks, except by monsters with the highest level. So ideally, if you have Neroy on the field, who's a level 3, and Morpheus on the field, who's level 8, Neroy will be protected because at times it can be kind of a sitting duck unless you find a way to get rid of it. But this only is applied while you control a light Dream Mirror monster, so you do gotta be careful. And again, this facilitates all of your dark monsters to trigger their effects. Conversely, Dream Mirror of Terror, where basically has the same effect where you can banish it to activate Dream Mirror of Joy, and then if you control a Dark Dream Mirror monster, you burn your opponent for 300 points of damage every time they special summon. So if you get this out on the field, you can do some decent burn damage depending on what type of deck they're playing, especially if they're wanting to do long drawn out combos. You could very slowly chip away at their life points and maybe kind of get an edge. Or, if time runs out for whatever reason, you would win on life points alone. Next, we have Dream Mirror Phantasms. So when this card is activated, I can add 1 Dream Mirror monster from my deck to my hand, and if Dream Mirror of Joy is in a field zone, all monsters I control gain 500 attack and defense. If Dream Mirror of Terror is in a field zone, all monsters your opponent controls lose 500 attack and defense. Now, this can be a boon. Now, unfortunately, this is one of those to where you kind of want to have, if you're going to have both field spells out at the same time, you want Dreamer of Terror on your side to make your opponent lose 500, because if they have Joy, sure, all monsters they control, or actually no, it doesn't matter. Yeah, no, if you have both out, your monsters get buffed and their monsters get debuffed, and it's either, yeah, gain 500 attack and defense or lose 500 attack and defense. I was thinking if they controlled one of the mirrors, but since I control this card, that would actually make a lot more sense. So yeah, this actually helps get you some of the monsters that you might need, like Neroi or a Kalos. Next is our fusion spell, Dreamer of Chaos. It is a quick play spell that fusion summons a Dreamer monster from your extra deck using monsters I control as fusion material. What's cool about this one is if Joy is in a field zone, I can use monsters in my hand, and if Terror is in the field zone, I can banish monsters from my graveyard, and you can only activate this card once per turn. So this is a good way to get into your main Dreamer fusions on your opponent's turn. If you have both field spells out, you can use hand, field, or graveyard as fusion materials, which is always kind of nice. Next, to be able to get into our field spells, because that's kind of what makes the deck actually go, and without the field spells, you're kind of hosed. I run 2 copies of Demise of the Land. It is another quick play spell to where when your opponent special summons a monster, you can activate a field spell directly from your deck. So, for example, at the start of your turn, if you only have, say, one of your Dreamer monsters and no field spell, you can grab the one you need to be able to trigger their effects. I only run 2 of these because it's not too difficult to get them online. And for our last spell, we run 1 Pot of Avarice. So Pot of Avarice makes it to where you can target 5 monsters in your graveyard, shuffle them into the deck, then draw 2 cards. This deck you will go through your deck very quickly, so this is just a good way to get recovery. But there are also a couple of cards that can help prevent a lot of this, so that's why I only run it at 1. Now, as I mentioned earlier, we need to get both field spells out on the field to maximize the deck potential. So we've got Dreamer Hypnagogia. So basically where I can choose 1 Dreamer of Joy and 1 Dreamer of Terror from my hand or deck, and place one in my field zone and the other in my opponent's field zone. This way, as long as you have both on the field, all the monsters can trigger their effects, which is very nice. And they're not going to get any use out of it unless you're doing a mirror match, which I don't even want to envision because that just sounds terrifying. We then play 2 copies of Dreamer of Neuromancy. It is a counter trap that has one of the 2 following effects. Let's center that a little. And when your opponent activates a spell or trap while Joy is in a field zone, you negate the activation and destroy it. Then, if Dreamer of Terror is in a zone, if your opponent would special summon a monster, you negate the summon and destroy it. Now, this thing won't always activate because especially when you get into stuff like inherent summons, I think is what it is. I still don't know too much about that and one of those what the difference is when you special summon. So, yeah, but otherwise it is a good way. For example, if you go first and you get this face down and Joy is in a field zone, say they activate Branded Fusion, they negate the effect and destroy. You activate Fusion Destiny, you get rid of it. You can potentially get rid of some of their problem cards, or if they do end up summoning out a big boss monster that isn't an inherent summon, you can negate the summon straight up. Next, I run 2 copies of Dreamer Fantasy. So Dreamer Fantasy makes it to where if you control a Dreamer monster, you can target one of your banished Dreamer of Joy and Terror, shuffle them into the deck, and banish 1 card on the field. Keep in mind, this does not target, so this bypasses pretty much all restrictions. And if a Dreamer monster or a card I control would be destroyed by battle or card effect, I can banish this card from the graveyard. Now, there is a card in here, it's called Dreamer Recap, which makes it to where anytime you attribute a monster, it actually gets shuffled back into the deck to give you some recurability. And it could be one that you can swap out, but that's entirely up to you. It's whatever you think would be good for the deck, because if you're lucky, you can go ahead and start getting a full board of monsters really quickly and try and just barrel through your opponent and out them in card advantage and card economy. But, well, again, it's up to you. And our last trap card is a new one that just came out in Dimension Force, and that is Exclusion. So when your opponent activates a monster effect in the hand, you can negate the activation, and if they have any cards in their hand, they discard 1 card from their hand of their choice. So this card is actually really cool. This is a counter trap that works well in Dream Mirrors because Dreamers, they have to tribute themselves for the cost, and they usually summon out from the deck. If your opponent tries to Ash Blossom you, and you have the set face down, you can negate it, so they'll send Ash Blossom, the effect is negated, and then they have to get rid of another card in their hand. But that is it for the main deck. So for the side deck, this is kind of an incomplete side deck because there's, again, a lot of cards that I don't have, so I'm making do with what I got since the main focus is mostly on these fusions. Oop. If I can get a hold of them. So we start off with 3 copies of Oneros, the Dreary Tormentor. Also, take a look at this guy's artwork. Tell me that doesn't look like a guy from a Final Fantasy game. Seriously, it's like Sephiroth on steroids. But I do run him at 3, and it requires 2 Dreary monsters with different attributes, which is very easy to do so because of light and dark. And even easier if you just want to go straight into this if you have both Neiroys on the field. While it's face on the field, this card is also light attribute. When a monster effect is activated with Dreamer of Terror is on the field, I can just negate a monster effect, blank it straight up, and then if Dreamer of Joy is in the field, I contribute it to summon Oneros, the Dreamer Earl King from the extra deck in defense mode. So if your opponent activates a monster effect once per turn, you can just say no, as long as Terror is out on the field, and it's a 10-star 3k body, which can be kind of hard to get over. Note to self, I need to find a couple of my 10-star, some of my 10-star extra deck monsters, because it might actually be good to exceed them off, or rank 10 rather, if it comes to dire straits. But yeah, this is the one that you kind of want to go into the most, so you can negate monster effects kind of on a whim during every turn, as long as you have the corresponding field spell. Next, I run 3 copies of Dreamer Earl King, and let's take a look at that. And again, something out of Final Fantasy, or maybe even a Tales game. So, while this card is on the field, this card is also Dark Attribute. If another monster is tributed while this card is on the field, I can target a card on the field and destroy it. And if this card is destroyed by an opponent's card, whether by battle or by card effect, I can special summon a Dreamer monster from my graveyard, except another copy of itself. So ideally, if he goes to the graveyard, you can bring back Tormentor or any other Dreamer you might need to recuperate your plays. Next, for some Xyz monsters, I run 1 Ghost Trick Dullahan. Requires 2 level 1 monsters, which would be your Akalos cards, if you have them out on the field and for some reason their effects get negated in some way. This card gains 200 attack for each Ghost Trick card I control. In this case, it'll only be him, so it'll only go up to 1200. Then once per turn, I can detach a material from this card, target a face-up monster on the field, and have its attack until the end of the turn. And if this card is sent to the graveyard, I can add a Ghost Trick card from my grave to my hand, which I don't really plan on using. This is just a one-off. Again, this extra deck is kind of incomplete, so bear with me. Then run 1 number 3 Cicada King, which just requires 2 level 3 monsters. So if you have both Neiroys on the field and they're kind of sitting ducks, you can Xyz these 2 off. So if the battle position of this card is changed, I can special summon an insect monster from my hand or graveyard, but we don't need to worry about that. And when a monster on the field activates its effect, I can detach 1 material, target that monster, negate its effects, then make 1 insect monster on the field either gain 500 attack or change its battle position. So what you can do is, especially if this card is in defense mode, what you can do is go ahead and give it 500 extra defense every turn, as long as it has materials where it can get up to 3,000 and then 3,500, so it makes for kind of a good wall. Next up, for a couple of rank 4s, I run 1 Abyss Dweller, which allows you to detach a material and basically prevent your opponent from activating any effects in their graveyard, which is always a nice little staple. 1 Gaga Cowboy, where if it's an attack position, you can detach a material and have this card gain 1,000 attack if it battles an opponent's monster, while they lose 500 attack during the damage step only, or in defense mode, inflict 800 points of damage to potentially close out games. Then 1 copy of Time Thief Redoer. Once per turn, you can attach the top card of your opponent's deck to this card as material. You can detach up to 3 different types of materials from this card and apply the following effects. If it's a monster, you can banish this card until the end phase to avoid any negative effects. Spell lets you draw a card, and Trap lets you place 1 face-up card your opponent controls on the top of the deck. Keep in mind, this is also, if you can get a Trap card for whatever reason, you can just put a card back into the deck, on the top of the deck or back into their extra deck, and it doesn't target, so you just pick one, which is kind of nasty. Then 1 Castel the Sky Blaster Musketeer. So, when it's on the field, I can detach a material and then target a monster on the field and change it to face down defense position, or I can detach 2 materials from this card, target another card on the field, and shuffle it back into the deck. So this is, again, similar to Abyss Dweller and like Redoer. This is just kind of a good rank 4 staple if you are needing to use either of the Phantasos and you get them both on the field and they can't really be used much. It'd be a good thing to go into. Then for 1 rank 8 monster, I have Gimmick Puppet Giant Grinder. Up to twice per turn during the main phase 1, I can detach 1 material, then target 1 special summon monster my opponent controls, destroy it, and if it was an Xyz monster, it takes damage equal to its original attack. It also makes for a good 2,500 point defensive wall. Then lastly, I run just 2 Link monsters, 1 Nightmare Phoenix, to be able to get rid of discard a card, then target a spell or trap my opponent controls and destroy it, and then if it's co-linked, you can draw a card. Just for some decent removal if I need it, and then 1 Salamangreat Almirage, which requires 1 normal summon monster with 1,000 or less attack. You can tribute this card, then target a monster you control, and it can't be destroyed by your opponent's card effects. And when a normal summon monster you control is destroyed by battle, you can special summon Almirage. So if you have Nayroy and Nayroy's effect gets negated or ashed, you can link it off for Salamangreat Almirage just to kind of get in the graveyard and potentially retrieve it at a later date. Because unfortunately you can't get its effect, and if you can bring it back from the grave, all the better. So all in all, this deck is actually a lot of fun to play. It does require a little bit of a skill ceiling to really get to work, but once you can get everything online, you can overwhelm your opponent and constantly disrupt their plays, which is always kind of fun. Since they tribute themselves for cost, this avoids stuff like skill drain. They just won't be able to activate their effects on follow-up when they are summoned, but it does get them off the field. Otherwise, I hope you enjoyed and look forward to this profile later today. And then my next project is to do a Master Duel deck profile for my Nephthys deck that a lot of you have been asking for. So hope you look forward to that when I get that done. Otherwise, thank you very much. I'll see y'all next time, and signing out.